Here's Parks Associates' SmartTechCheck podcast with Mark Vina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, leader of Parks Associates Smart Home Research Practice, and welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, where we cover all consumer tech topics that are smart home, home automation, security, console gaming related, and much, much more. Today is Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. We're back to my regular format like we did last week, and I want to tee up some great hot tech topics in the news with a few of my favorite tech journalists. So let me introduce some faces who have appeared multiple times on the podcast. Rob Pegoraro, who writes for USA Today and Yahoo Finance. John Quain, who writes on technology for the New York Times and Tom's Guide, and Stewart Wolpin, who writes for Twice and Techlicious, among other very, very well-known publications. Wow, that's what happens when you're doing a podcast in the afternoon. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, folks. Good to be here.
How are things?
Sticky again.
You know, I ask that question. I ask that question every week, and I don't get a really robust. Hey, things are great. You know, I'm a Yankee fan. Things are not that great. Okay.
I'm a Nationals fan. Things are worse.
I'm a Mets fan, and things are.
You know, and there's a couple of you guys. I'd like to trade you guys at the trading deadline, but I can't do that. You know, for an option for a player to be named later. But we do have some really hot tech topics I do want to go through. And the first one I want to go through, if I could pull it up on the screen, and this is a great topic for us to talk about. Right to repair legislation, is it practical? And the reason why I bring that up is that this topic is not a new topic. It's been bandied around for at least a couple of years now. And I actually struggle with it, honestly, but I want to get everyone's opinion on it because there's a consumer dimension to it. You know, obviously, if a product can be repaired less expensively, consumers love that. There's also a manufacturer's angle to it, that many of the products out there are not designed from the onset to be repaired. And that does have an implication because when you tell an industrial designer, hey, design a product in a certain way and it has to be opened up to be repaired, not all the time, but very often the product will be a little more challenging to repair. It won't look quite as sleek, you know, from an overall design standpoint. So I want to get your opinions on it. So John, let me start with you. What's your take on the whole right to repair legislation topic?
Well, this is really, people think of iPhones and things like that, but it's really an automotive issue. It started with, those shady mechanics. I used to fix my car all the time. I was constantly fixing it, putting in new stereo equipment, and doing the things that teenagers do to cars. But you can't do that anymore. There's so many use electronic control units in these cars, and the issue was people swapping them out and sort of boosting their car by putting in new computer chips and microprocessors. Obviously, OEMs didn't like that very much. They could stress out the car, increase wear and tear. That was part of their argument. But they pretty much, all the repair codes are secret, or they were secret to the OEMs. Made it very, very difficult to repair a car on your own. And I've done it a few times, and sometimes all it required was taking out that module, unplugging it, and putting a new one in. That was like $100 instead of a $500 repair. So, this was really a consumer. It was pushing consumers, and also to try and kickstart that old 12-volt industry, the repair add-on industry that wasn't there before.
Rob, you were vacant last week, so I'm gonna let you tee up the topic. What do you think?
I'm vacant lots of weeks. So John's right that this is not just a consumer issue. It does get a lot of attention when it's, will Apple let you replace the battery in your iPhone? Right. There's a big dimension of this in agriculture where, if you buy a new tractor or a combine or whatever, it's really expensive, and fixing it is also really expensive, and it is made more expensive than it has to be. And so that's one issue that a lot of these laws are trying to address. And it's not a new one. I just remember when you mentioned it, this was one of the few good ideas the Republican candidate for governor of Virginia had back in 2017, mandating the right to repair to help out Virginia farmers. Mm-hmm. And it really should be a bipartisan issue because it gets down to, using things like licensing agreements and control of one set of codes or another to limit people's economic freedom. So, Dems can hate the big company abusing its power. Republicans can want to stand up for, the individual who wants to fix their own tractor, wants to fix their own car. Mm-hmm. The downside is if you get into issues of detailed product design, which is usually a recipe for, the law of unintended consequences to show up and rear its large and ugly head.
So Stewart, for those consumers that are not buying tractors, because I don't think it's a big market. The tractor market for consumers is really not that big. I have to check my data, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Do you have any sympathy, Stewart, for manufacturers who want to design sleeker products? And then this is a consumer electronics focus.
Well, I think this is a both sides are right, and I am not sure that there is a one-size-fits-all solution. As both John and Rob point out, tractors are not cars, and cars are not smartphones. And to say that all three of those things are all of the right to repair items are all the same, I think is overly simplistic. That's the first thing. The second thing is there are springing up a number of state laws that seem to be different. Which is just going to confuse the issue a little more, especially as people move from state to state, or somebody buys something in one state and then uses it in another state. So there's all sorts of conflict. The FTC put out what was it called? Nixing the Fix. They put out a paper in May, a couple of months ago, on some workshops that they had done with automobile and smartphone manufacturers, amongst others. I don't know if tractor manufacturers were included, to try to figure out what the problems were. And it seems it's going to be up to the FTC to come up with a set of overarching rules that would apply to both manufacturers and hopefully to repair shops. I think the biggest issue is the right to repair. The problem seems to be laid at the feet of manufacturers, when I think that repair shops have an equal responsibility here. I don't think a repair shop should have the right to repair anything if they're not authorized to repair, because that just simply dupes the consumer into getting a bad or a very expensive repair. So I think solutions have to come from both sides. And I think there are pros and cons on both sides of the argument, which is a much longer conversation.
Yep. Well, and to your point, Stewart, Apple has very, very strict rules for its third-party repair network of dealers, that they have to do things in a specific type of way, and they're trying to maintain the level of quality, and that their dealer network, not Apple itself, but the dealer network that they work with to repair their products. So, I look at it from a product standpoint, that on one side of the world, in the consumer tech space, you've got the Dells of the world, which design their computers for configurability at the factory. So you can add memory, add storage, and Dell's always done a great job, doing that. Just to use laptops as kind of a proxy for the discussion. And on the other hand, you've got the Apples of the world that design a MacBook Air, that whatever options you want, you got to order it at the time it comes out of the factory. And by the way, if you try to open up the notebook, you void the warranty in most cases. So I guess the only thing,
Mark, I think there's two issues there, though.
Yep.
What you're talking about is not a right to repair. What you're talking about is a right to expand. I think that's different than a broken device that has to be fixed. And I think one of the problems that Apple has, that it seals its containers in such a way, a lot of times gluing them or using other methods that you can't open them, which affect both the right to update and the right to repair.
Yeah, I would say the topics are related, Stewart.
The one tip I give to anyone listening here is, before you buy a laptop, go to iFixit and check the repairability score, because that is going to be it'll be a factor in its long-term value if you can in fact replace or repair a component easily down the line.
Right.
I think one solution that I don't think I have seen suggested yet is for the government, instead of making restrictions, instead of using a stick, they should use a carrot. And that is go to repair shops and go, we will give you a tax credit if you pay the cost to become an authorized repair center for whomever you want to be an authorized repair center. I think that would go a long way to easing consumer concerns and expand the breadth of repair centers as well as the opportunities for repair centers to take part in the repair business.
Well, this is one of those topics we could talk about forever because everybody's got an opinion about it. And I don't know, call me crazy, but I'm not sure I want a bureaucrat, designing legislation about the design of a product. but I digress.
You're crazy.
I'm a crazy guy. All right, let's hit the next topic. And that is, and I forget, Rob was, I think it was Rob. Was it Rob? You teed up the whole issue around the Biden administration retriggering the net neutrality activity.
I've only been writing about net neutrality. Well, the way I put it at a panel a couple of years ago, I'm serving a life sentence of writing about net neutrality, actually. I can talk about that. Yeah. So,
yeah. Let's start with you.
So we have sort of conflicting messages here. The Biden administration is saying, the FCC should reinstate the net neutrality rules that the FCC got rid of under the Trump administration. But the FCC cannot and will not do that as long as it's in a 2-2 tie, 2 Republican appointees, 2 Democratic appointees. That won't change, is guaranteed not to change until the Biden administration names a 5th member of the FCC. And we know they've been no slouch at naming people for nominations as judges, lots of other positions. Most tech policy reporters I know are really confused what the holdup is, since you can't come out with this huge white paper on competition policy and say the FCC, we encourage them to do these things. Well, the administration needs to do its job first. Right. As for net neutrality itself, I think I've been covering it long enough. I can give a very convincing argument for it, having these rules, or against them. I think the idea that any individual ISP is going to start charging Netflix extra for carrying its data, if it was going to happen under the last 4 years, it would have. On the other hand, there's lots of mischief that ISPs do in terms of violating users' privacy and whatnot, that the FCC could readily step in with the authority it had under the old net neutrality rules. Right now it can't. The Federal Trade Commission can, but the FCC is completely swamped, although at least that does have a full slot of commissioners. At least I think it has a full set of commissioners now. So, this all ties into a bunch of other things, because right now the FCC is basically locked away a lot of the tools it had to police things besides ISPs impeding content, slowing it, or charging for paid prioritization, because it's all tied up in the same sort of regulatory bundle. And when it said we're not going to view ISPs as Title II utilities, the acting commissioner can complain loudly, can strenuously object to when an ISP does something that is anti-competitive or customer hostile, but there's not really anything the FCC can do right now.
John, I think John wants to make a point.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, doesn't everything those carriers do is customer hostile?
We're beginning to sound around.
They don't have to impose these fees, when people say, well, we don't impose these fees, because they're getting them paid anyway already. Netflix is already paying. Lots of people are paying for prioritization. So, it's definitely frustrating. It really needs to come back so that, and there's a lot of throttling that goes on in all of these carriers. So, it's definitely frustrating, but Rob's right. They need to get that 5th person in there. They need to tip the scales the other way and get it back. But, having Pi there was kind of the fox in the hen house, right? He was the Verizon guy saying, oh, gee, I don't think we need this net neutrality stuff. And I once had a interesting breakfast with somebody very high up from Verizon who started in on that argument about net neutrality. And I just about threw the eggs and everything at him during breakfast. But, that's the way it was designed. And these companies are making a lot of money off of something that they did not invent and they did not create and they did not design. So it seems not right if they're taking it over and sort of, and there's a lot of concern too about the globalization of the internet and who has control over it, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully they'll get this sorted out. Rob, you're in DC. I'm in New York, so I can't do anything about it.
I'm doing what I can, one tweet at a time.
Stewart, I want to give Stewart the last word. Stewart, what are your thoughts on
the last word is zebra? No, I'm sorry. Well, a couple of things. First of all, not only are we missing a seat on the FCC, the current chairman is only acting. Jessica Rosenworcel is only acting. I think one of the delays is the fact that she's going to have a new boss. And that new boss is the Office of Science, Technology, something, the first level, cabinet level science advisor that the president's going to have, who is Dr. Eric Lander. And he was only Senate approved at the end of May. Now, he is primarily involved in biological science and the health. And so I think he has been focused far more on getting involved in the whole COVID-19 issue than he is on the high tech side. And I think that's one of the problems with picking a guy like Lander, who has a world of experience on science, not so much on technology. But
I'm not sure about that read. By statute, the FCC is an independent agency, so Obama couldn't just order them to do net neutrality.
Right.
Happening.
Lander's portfolio includes the FCC as the science advisor. So my only, and I'm guessing because I don't know, that they were probably waiting for Lander to finally get Senate approved and have Lander at least involved in some level on the decision on who Biden was going to pick for the FCC.
That's true. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's not how you should run it. The FCC affects policy much more directly than the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but my reading of Lander's portfolio is the FCC falls under his purview. That's the way that I read the legislation enabling his appointment to cabinet level. The FCC is not cabinet level. So the way that I read the way the division of responsibility was that the FCC is titularly under Lander. That's the way that I read it. If I may be wrong, that's the way that I read it. So I can't think of any other reason why this has been delayed so long. And that's the only thing I could come up with.
It's going to be interesting to see the way this issue pans out. I mean, it's got a lot of moving tentacles to it. And anytime, an issue like this is affecting the carriers, which obviously it does, it just gets really, really messy. So
well, there's a second issue here, Mark, is that the reason that I believe one of the reasons that Biden did this was because there's broadband policy between either 65 million or 100 million or a million, billion, whatever the number is, in the infrastructure packages that are before Congress at the moment.
Right.
And because those are there, they're going to need the reason he invoked these rules is to make this part of the infrastructure package. So if one of these packages get passed, he's going to be pushed to get the FCC to full strength.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. That's the implication. And it's going to be interesting to see the way this pans out. I'm not sure everyone knows what the answer is going to be, but it's a very, very complex issue. But I want to move the discussion along to the next topic here. And I love this topic, and I'm glad that Mr. Pegoraro teed this one up because I like when my fellow journalists here, they love to bring up personal issues in their day-to-day tech life. And it looks like Verizon crossed your ire, Rob, and they looks like they finally are shipping streaming apps. Finally, Comcast has been doing that forever. But it looks like they were hiding a $20 monthly fee. So let's talk about
it's that. Like Verizon, why you got to be like this? So yeah, this is a drum I've been banging since like the mid 2010s, I guess. And under the prior FCC, under Obama, there was this proposal, ditch the box, to mandate that pay TV providers provide, some way for third parties, or at least ship streaming apps. And the cable industry said, we'll do it. We're already shipping streaming apps, which was kind of a lie. It didn't actually happen. And Verizon has been a leading indicator, even though in other respects, 2 years ago, they changed up their TV pricing to eliminate a lot of the things that people hate. Fios TV the price is no longer buried in the cost of a bundle. It's the same whether if you pay for Fios Internet, Fios TV, you don't have to get it. You won't pay more for your internet if you don't. The price you see doesn't have fine print local channel and sports network fees waiting to be hidden, but they've always charged too much for hardware. And so when I saw, and this got picked up by a lot of Mac news sites, oh, great, Fios TV, Apple TV app, not the mobile apps where you could, watch TV on your iPad. And eventually they added Chromecast and AirPlay support, but an actual real app for Apple TV and for Fire TV. And I was writing this up for one of my TradeCo clients, Fierce Video. And I thought, let me just see where they show this in the order flow. So open an incognito window, plugged in a friend's address, acted as if I was setting up new service. And it says, do you want streaming service? $20. Do you want streaming apps? $20 a month. Really? And the pricing structure is you will get screwed on this unless you're going to replace at least 3 rented boxes. And the way, first of all, Verizon thinks people are going to appreciate seeing this little surprise halfway down the purchase funnel. Number 2, that this is the ultimate in junk fees. The apps don't cost $20 a month to maintain. This is Verizon charging money because it can.
Yes.
And at the same time, Verizon has been bleeding subscribers. They had their earnings call, I think, on Wednesday. And, they've lost about 1/5 of their pay TV customer base in the last 4 years, more than 1/5. And yet the subject of video subscribers never came up. It's
right.
As if they're done with this. And, I can't tell they're just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, or they're just going to go for just total rent-seeking behavior with the remaining Fios TV customer base, which I should note includes my mother. So this is personal to me. And it's like everyone complains about cord cutting and then does things that accelerate it. So I'm just not interested in hearing any whining from big telcos about how bad the video business is.
John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Rob. This is sort of like they're casting about to try and come up with ways to, keep the revenue up while they're losing subscribers. And they're just, going to shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, the more you do things like that, the worse you're going to make the situation. Instead of adding more features and more technology and more options for people, they're taking away or charging for things that people get free from everyone else, which just seems crazy. It's why I have Roku boxes on everything. I just get fed up and easier. Just plug in that Roku box, whatever you're running, and you get everything. And but it comes back to our discussion before too about Spectrum still fighting with Roku about their app being on Roku and stuff. I think it should be on Roku. Just a hint that maybe you might want to keep it there. So anyway, that's my opinion.
I can't leave this topic without asking Stewart's getting 45 seconds on Stewart's thoughts on this.
Well, I think this is a competitive issue. I think, like Rob said, Verizon is charging it because they can. And of course, $20 a month is insane because a Roku box is $40,
Period. So not per month.
Whatever it is, it's really, really cheap. In fact, I just got one. I mean, TiVo boxes, for instance, have a number, not all of the ones that I want, but I think this is a competitive issue. And I think that at a certain point, all the cable providers will start including OTT services in their boxes simply because they're going to have to. Consumers are going to start demanding not having to switch inputs every time they want to watch Apple TV or Verizon Prime Video or Netflix or whatever. So I think this will be a competitive issue. And I think that the technology as well as the competitive space will force cable companies to start including the OTT services on their boxes.
Right. No, I think just to conclude on this topic, I think Rob nailed it. If you're trying to do things to encourage more cord cutting, this would be it. And by the way, I have Comcast back in San Jose, and I have actually been able to throw all my boxes out the window. With the except you do need one box to enable the service, and there's a lot of issues I have with Comcast from time to time. But they are not charging for you to use the streaming apps, and by the way, their experience is actually pretty good. It's almost a set-top box like experience. So there is a way to do this the right way, and That's it's really strange that Verizon, who's shedding customers, is going down this path because this is not a very consumer friendly type of course of action for them. Let's get the next topic. And John, this is your topic: e-bikes continuing to flourish during the pandemic. Let's let you tee this one off.
Yeah, it was really taking off before the pandemic in Europe. I mean, e-bikes had become really a big thing there. Much more of a bicycle culture. People were trying to encourage their use here. It's a way to get seniors on bicycles in warmer climate, in neighborhoods where they don't want vehicles, and e-bikes made it just that much easier to get on bicycles. Commuting was a good idea because you didn't show up at work calls ready because you had an electric assist. So it was a much better solution for a lot of people trying to commute to work in their suit or whatever, back when people did that. But during the pandemic, a whole new thing took over, and that was, of course, people didn't want to be on public transportation. We're probably going to see that persist in places like New York and cities. And people will be shunning public transportation. These e-bikes provide a great option, and so they've just been impossible to get. I review a lot of e-bikes, and they're often, they'll lend me one for a few days because they just need every bike they have off the chart.
Rob, do you take your e-bike to work? Are you
well, my commute to work is walking upstairs. So that would be a no.
Okay.
I have seen. My bike is old enough to not just to vote but to drink. So I've now gotten accustomed, if I'm going for a ride, around DC, that I will hear this whirring noise behind me, and somebody will just whoosh past me on an e-bike and make me feel even older than I already do as I'm wheezing up the trail. And for that matter, Capital Bike Share, our bike share system, they've added e-bikes, and they're at all the stations, and you see people rolling around them as well. And especially when it's as hot and humid as it is in DC, anything that generates a little bit more of a breeze is a good thing. So I can see why they are so popular and worth paying a little surcharge per ride.
Well, it's amazing, and I do want to get the last word from Stewart on this, because he looks like an e-bike type of guy, is that if you look, when you get time, go into Kickstarter or Indiegogo or any of the funding campaigns that you see out there, and I kid you not, you probably will see 30 or 40 different e-bike companies, startups, trying to get their their little piece of heaven, and it's an exploding category. I don't know if I want to spend a couple $1,000s with a company that I've never heard of, because to me that's a considered purchase. But it is a very, very a big market, and it's only getting bigger. And then I think during the pandemic, obviously for the reasons that John outlined, it certainly got a little bit of a kick in the pants. Although there was a lot of momentum before the pandemic started. Any last words on this, Stewart?
You couldn't get me on an e-bike if you paid me in New York City traffic.
Come on.
I'm sorry. I'm just an old scaredy cat who thinks he looks terrible with a bike helmet on his head. I've been offered any number of ebook review opportunities. I've turned them all down because the thought of taking even a regular bicycle into New York City traffic scares the bejesus out of me. If everybody on the planet or everybody in the city would be riding an e-bike, I would probably get one. But as long as there's still semi-trucks riding on the streets of Manhattan and bus lanes and all and taxi cab drivers, I'm barely brave enough to walk on the streets of New York, much less get on an e-bike to ride on one.
John, Stewart, I would pay money to see you on an e-bike going to City Field to see the Mets play.
It would have to be a crap load of money.
Let's go to the last topic here before we conclude the podcast. And that is, and this was my topic, and I cannot not be amused by this. Is that yesterday it was reported that Apple was going to attend NAB for the first time in 10 years. Now, and then I think maybe it was 2 hours ago, I checked on Apple Insider, and guess what? Apple has removed themselves from NAB. So obviously there's some marketing communications manager someplace at NAB that's probably going to get their hands slapped, or maybe they'll get their hands that person will get their hand slapped at Apple. But the reason why I bring this up is that there's this kind of fiction that goes on that Apple doesn't go to trade shows, and they do go to trade shows. You don't see them on the floor.
They just don't exhibit.
They just don't exhibit. But I can assure you, they're when there are trade shows going on. By the way, let me caveat it by saying when there's no pandemics going on. But to me, this is just so amusing, and I just want to get your quick reaction to this because I just think something like this, literally, is a story for like 24 hours. Because yes, they're going to be there. No, they're not going to be there. So I want to get John's reaction real quick to that.
Well, I think, everybody would love Apple to come to their trade show, no matter what trade show was, if it was CES or anything, please come to our trade show. So I think they just, I don't know exactly what happened there. Somebody jumped the gun, right? There's like, Apple will be there. It'll be amazing. Like you guys said, they're there. They're just not there. Right. So you have to meet them in the hotel. That's what's going to happen.
When Macworld was around, that's one of the few trade shows I never went to. And
it was so much fun.
I heard that they were fun trade shows. That was a fun trade show. But Rob, what are your thoughts on this kind of little bit of silly news here the last 24 hours?
Yeah, Apple was never going to show up in NAB. That didn't make a whole lot of sense because, they just don't do it. Macworld was almost more like a multiple day Apple event. Just, it had the advantage for me as a journalist. It ended before blogging became a thing. So you go to San Francisco, file your one story. By 3:00, it was at the editor's desk. Then you could just do whatever for the rest of the day. Now they just have their own events and they're all virtual. I do wonder about NAB as a large show happening in Vegas because, next week there's the Black Hat and DEF CON conferences, the two security events in Vegas. And I am registered to go to Black Hat and I'm about to cancel my flights for that because the numbers are going all the wrong way in much of the US, but especially in Vegas and even in Clark County where the fully vaccinated rate is only 40%. And it's a conference in a city with a giant tourist demographic that self-selects for poor risk management. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, it's hotter than the surface of the sun in Vegas in August. So you can't really hold a class outside. NAB is in October. It's a little bit better, but I don't know.
Stewart, you can close us out on this topic.
Well, I think Rob has hit on it, and I think it has to do with the pandemic more than anything else.
Really?
Remember, Apple was going to reopen for all its employees at its spaceship, and then decided not to because of COVID. So I have a deep suspicion that this is a related issue. That maybe that Apple had intended to go to NAB in some way, shape, or form, either as an exhibitor or in a hotel room. But then because they decided not to force employees to go back to work, that they decided they didn't want to force employees to go to Clark County where the vaccination rate is so low. So I think this might have more to do with the pandemic and the fact that I'm surprised there's an NAB or any convention right now to begin with, than it has to do with whether or not they thought they belonged there or not.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting to me here. And, believe it or not, the battery light on my notebook is about to pop. So we have to end the podcast there. Listen, guys, thanks for your time. Really appreciate you contributing to the podcast once again, like you normally do. Please follow the Park Associates SmartTechCheck podcast on our usual social media suspect partners. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And until next time, have a great week.